Just to let you know, we are recording, videoing. Alfred's on there as well. Welcome, Alfred.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us again.
Yep.
Water watcher, waterman.
Can't get enough of this.
Well, I think we could probably fairly start because if we're just waiting for Jim, I think he's pretty savvy on the rate system, etc. Everyone else okay with starting?
Yes. Yes, thank you.
Okay, hi, John. So
Hi.
just by way of introduction, we have Annette Frischman. She's our utilities coordinator, and she'll be talking about rates and consumption. We have Raj Hayre. He's our chief financial officer. He'll be presenting our financial reports. And Patrick Graham is our new director of engineering, and he'll be talking about water quality and operations. And you all know the famous councillor Alison Morse, who is our council representative for these committees. So thank you to those members of the public who are joining us today. And feel free to interrupt with questions. You can also use the chat function. I'm not able to see it when I'm running the presentation, but other staff members are. So you can use that if you're too shy to speak. Okay, Annette, are you ready to roll here?
Yes, can we share the screen?
Yes. Here we go.
I am going to give you a quick overview of the Bowen Bay rate structure. There were 60 connections in 2019 and 1 unconnected lot. The source is from 3 drilled groundwater wells. The meters in Bowen Bay are read between June 1st and September 30th for billing purposes, and they're also read twice during the winter months just for checking on leaks.
Oh, yeah.
The annual flat rate for the connected lots in 2019 was $705, and the annual flat rate for the unconnected lots was $447. This has gone slightly up as of this year, with $800 for the connected and $500 for the unconnected lots. And the flat rate includes an average of 240 gallons per day. And there are excess consumption charges in effect for usage between June through October, and up to 7,200 gallons per month. There is no extra charge. 7,201 gallon to 9,000 gallons. There's 2 cents per gallon per month extra, and then 10 cents for the next 3,000 gallons. And if it's more than 12,001 gallon per month, it's 20 cents per gallon. The bill is issued. Oh, and those excess rates, those excess usage charges have not gone up as of 2020. The billing frequency is annually, and the bill will go out in October this year. For the purpose of contacting the Bowen Bay water users quickly in case there is a leak on private property, we encourage everyone to sign up through our website, and the link is on the first page of the agenda, where you can submit your email address so we can contact you quickly if we discover a leak. Do you have any questions on the rate charge, on the rate structure?
Just a question, wondering whether you had people going over the 7,000?
In 2019, I believe there was nobody who went over on average But
That's
I
the
would
next.
have actually to double check and pull out and look into the.
And you have, so far things have been okay for this month, for this year?
Yes.
Yep. It's been a good wet year by and large.
It's also a fairly high allowance, 240 gallons per day. It's 1 cubic meter. Most families use, if it's 2 to 3 people, the average is around half of that only.
Thank you.
John, I had a question about the excess.
Yes.
If some municipalities have a forgiveness, if you have a break in your water main and you have a huge bill, like 7,000 or 8,000, has that ever been contemplated for Bowen?
So it's actually in place. It's called our utility charge adjustment policy and can be found on the website under government policies. And it, in case of a leak, under certain circumstances, there is an adjustment possible of the water bill if there was overconsumption that everyone can apply for.
Okay, thank you.
I can send you that link, John.
Thanks, Steph.
And then the other, which of course we'll probably come to, but the rate is jumping by over 10%. Is that because, I guess Raj will come to it, because we're topping up or trying to increase our contingency reserve?
Yeah, we'll talk
That'll
about
be part, well, we'll go over that when we look at the 5-year financial plan. But that was the intention of the increase, was to increase the contributions to reserves, and also utilities, they're all self-funded. So in the event there haven't been an increase in a number of years, so where the expenditures were continuously outpacing the revenues, if part of it was to address the issue of the expenditures, but for the most part, it had to do with increasing contributions to reserves.
Okay, thank you.
If there are no more questions, I'll move on to consumption.
Here is a slide showing the consumption of 2019, the average per connection, and the daily average per connection. It was about just a little more than 29,000 gallons per connection per year in 2019, while in 2018 it was slightly higher with about 32,600 per connection, which is it's about 89 gallons per day per connection. There were 60 connections versus 59 connections in 2018. Are there any questions regarding the consumption graph? If not, I'll hand over to you, Raj.
Thanks, Annette. I'm going to be going over the 2019 operating results and capital results, and then I'll be going over the 5-year financial plan for both operating and capital, and I'll conclude with going over your reserve balances. So this chart here shows you the 2019 actual results in comparison to the budget, with the very right-hand column showing showing the variance to budget, and the 2018 numbers have been provided for context. So total revenues for 2019 were 45,268, or 2,368 favorable to budget. Part of that was a favorable to budgeted variance in water fees for about 1,000, and the return on investments. So basically your reserve funds for Bowen Bay are deposited with the Municipal Finance Authority. So the earnings on the reserve balance exceeded what was projected. In terms of expenses, the staff compensation expense of 22,971 was slightly unfavorable to budget due to overtime worked on water system issues that wasn't budgeted for. The supplies and services line is a little bit more significantly unfavorable to budget, and essentially there were higher supplies and materials purchases during the year. Supplies and materials were purchased for all water systems. So as essentially the cost of supplies and materials was allocated to each water system based on number of connections. So about 5% of the materials and supplies purchased were allocated to Bowen Bay, because Bowen Bay's connected properties represent 5% of all connected properties. And essentially at the end of the day, I'm looking at the transfer to reserves line. The net expenditures in Bowen Bay exceeded the budgeted net expenditures by about $3,755. And so there was actually $3,755 less than budgeted available to contribute to the capital reserve for works. Essentially in a utility, the revenues collected during the year fund the expenditures and the transfer to reserves. Is there any questions on the 2019 operating results before I move on to the capital results?
Yeah, Raj, why the decrease in utility fees from 18 to 19?
From 18 to 19, consumption was a little bit lower in 19. So Annette, did the consumption-based charge kick in on some property? It must have kicked in on some of the properties during the year.
Yep, okay, fair enough.
So it would be consumption. It's a consumption-based, the consumption-based charge.
I would have to double check, but I believe that's
Yeah, we'll
correct.
have to double check, but consumption was a little bit lower.
Thank you.
Okay, are we ready to move to capital results?
If we can move to the next slide. So there was no capital spending in 2019, so there's nothing really to report in 2000
Meeting here
for capital spending for Bowen Bay.
this afternoon.
If we can move to the next slide, which is the 5-year. So the 5-year operating plan here reflects the increase in rates. So we're anticipating for 2020 for the user fees to be about 48,600, and I believe there was a 1.5% to 2% inflation factor factored into the outer years here. So essentially, the revenues each year must fund the expenditures, and you can see that the budgeted transfer to reserves has increased to about 15,200 from the previous year, where it was, I believe, $7,900. So we've doubled the contribution, the budgeted contribution to the reserve from past years in 2020. Any questions? And so we are now currently in our, and we're entering our next 5-year financial planning exercise. So this 5-year financial plan is a snapshot of what we anticipated the results to be for the next 5 years as of October, November 2019. So we will go through a planning exercise and update these estimates to anticipate what spending will be for the next 5 years. And then user fees will be the, essentially we'll take a look at what our expenditure requirements are, and that'll dictate what user-free revenue needs to be to balance the equation of essentially a self-funded utility. If there's no questions on the 5-year operating financial plan, can we move to the next slide, Steph, which shows the 5-year financial plan for capital? So essentially last year when we went through the financial planning exercise, we had reviewed the proposed capital projects with the local area advisory committee. So the 2020 planned projects are listed in the 2020 column. And again, we'll be going through, and then the 2021 to 2024 was an anticipation of what work we would be doing in the outer years. So we will be developing a new 5-year financial plan for capital works for the 2021 to 2025 years in the upcoming months, which we'll be reviewing with the local area advisory committee prior to going to council with recommendations.
So what of this has actually happened this year in 2020?
So 2020, I'm going to let Patrick answer the question in terms of which capital works are being worked on in 2020. But one of the things I wanted to highlight is if these works are not done in 2020, then the money will not come out of your work for capital, your capital reserve. We only take out of the capital reserve the extent of spending in the projects that take place. So some of these are budget provisions and will not necessarily result in an expenditure in the current year. I can, while Patrick's looking that up, I can quickly call up my, actually I do have it up here.
I have a question. It's Jim Taylor here.
Mhm.
The $30,000 for monitoring. This was an item that came up at our last face-to-face meeting. And I said, that was very much over, but an excessive amount of money.
And I'm just gonna let you know, I mean, there may not be any spending on that either, so.
What I'm afraid of is, money being earmarked at a certain amount that's overinflated from my perspective.
It is a budget provision, so I believe the spending against that is, right now it's $5,500. I don't know if that's the full extent of the spending or not, but the budget provision would likely have been requested in a little bit in excess of what was anticipated.
That's
so
a lot.
Having to go back to council for permission for more funds because we wouldn't be able to acquire the equipment if it came out at higher than what the budget provision was. But if
we don't know what we don't know
monitoring equipment has been
$5,500
purchased, if all of that aquifer monitoring equipment has been purchased, then the expenditure for 2020 is $5,600. Are you able to confirm, Patrick, if all of that spending has occurred?
Yes, we did install monitoring equipment in the Bowen Bay wells, and I don't believe there's going to be any additional expenditure. There will be some expenditure relating to the aquifer study that's being shared between the 3 water systems that are on that aquifer. But that's the extent of the monitoring equipment.
So to your point, Jim, then there'll only be $5,600 funded from the reserve for the aquifer monitoring equipment.
So I have a question. What is the household rate for the 3 districts?
Okay, I'll go back, I think.
Okay, the household rate for the 3 districts, for Bowen Bay impact?
No, for the aquifer monitoring.
It's not, the rates are impacted to the extent of the contribution to the reserve for capital works. So can you go back one more slide, Steph?
Yep.
So essentially a $15,200 contribution to budgeted contribution to reserves is what is impacting rates, which is a modest contribution given the age and condition of the Bowen Bay infrastructure. I don't know what that contribution should be, but I can tell you it certainly should be higher, quite a bit higher than $15,200 a year. So the contribution to capital reserves to replace and address capital needs for Bowen Bay The 15,200 contribution is not
I understand that.
on
I
the age
understand
and
that
structure
totally.
of
My
your
question
infrastructure.
was, is that there's an ongoing monitoring of the 3 west side areas for, looking at the aquifer. And is there a number that's been attached to each residence for that?
The cost of that study is being shared according to number of connections.
And what is the total cost of that study estimated to be?
The total cost is
The monitoring cost, not the capital cost, it's the monitoring cost.
well, it's not, it's monitoring, and it's also an assessment of the aquifer and the 3 water systems and how they could be optimized. But the total cost of that is about 34,000, I believe. 14,000 of that is being contributed by the developer of the King Edward Bay Phase 2 development. And then the remaining approximately 20,000 is being shared between the
250 prop, so it's about $100 a property.
something like that.
Yeah.
A bit less than that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
that's a good answer. Thank you, Patrick. That's clear for you, Jim?
I'm good.
Yay.
Jumping back to the last slide, there was an item for water meter charges, but are we changing water meters, or is this just a cost for some meters that have failed?
It was a provision for changing water meters, and I don't believe any cost has been incurred in Bowen Bay.
So that means that this year, then that actual cost will be 0 because there's no budget for next year.
We'll be going through the next year's budget preparation exercise over the next months, but so far this year, the cost is 0. And I don't, Patrick can confirm that, but I don't believe there's any further plans for replacing it this year.
These are the new monitors that are that you don't have to read. They're electronic. Is that correct?
That provision was, I believe, budgeted in an outer year, and it'll be revisited if you're talking about the replacement with electronic. That was.
Well, I don't think you're going to get 60 done for $10,000.
No, that's something different. The replacement of automated metering in the water systems is a much larger project, and we wouldn't embark on that project without understanding the cost benefit of doing that.
Sorry, I didn't read it correctly. I see it's just new. It's the mainline metering.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
And I'm not sure that we have issues with the mainline meter that justify that expenditure. We'll be reviewing that as part of the budget preparation for next year.
It'd be nice if it was actually in the 8-inch pipe that we're going to have to put in some year.
It doesn't know about the 8-inch pipe history.
I'm not sure which pipe you're referring to.
Well, eventually everybody would like to see everything upgraded so it's to our standards, and that's an 8-inch pipe, I believe.
Well, one of the things that we are undertaking is a assessment and design work to look at what the upgrading requirements and options are for all of the west side water systems in order to provide reliable supply as well as fire protection flows. And that would involve additional reservoir storage as well as probably mains upgrades as well.
So can we have Muni Hall money for this?
Maybe we should get through these financial reports and we can move on to public works projects in the public works section of the,
Thanks, Steph. So can we go to the next slide then? So the final slide here is showing the reserve balances, or what's in the reserve balances for Bowen Bay. So the closing balance in December 2018 was $89,003. There's a contribution of $4,145 made in 2019. So the closing reserve balance for 2019 Bowen Bay was $93,148.
oops, sorry.
And that concludes the financial section slides for Bowen Bay.
I can always reshare if somebody wants to see.
You take up a lot of screen.
Pardon?
Got a big face there.
Me, I could just go to the view in the top right corner and it'll give you the option to do a grid.
It's all right. It's all right.
It's called gallery view.
That's fine. I've got you on a 50-inch monitor.
Okay,
I
so
can pick your teeth.
jeez, thank you, Raj and Annette. Patrick has provided, and Annette has provided the Vancouver Coastal Health Annual Report for 2019, which takes a look at water quality and operations. And they've also provided information regarding an RFP, a request for proposals. And have people had a chance to look at those documents? And if so, do you have questions?
You're asking if we have questions about the RFP?
Okay,
Is that what you're asking?
sure, yes. Either that or the Vancouver Coastal Health Report.
Yeah, I have done better here.
Hi, Dennis.
Hi, how are you? I have some questions about the RFP. I guess one question is why the inclusion of Tunstall Bay? It seems like one of the key focuses of this RFP is to improve fire protection. Is that correct? I mean,
Well, that is a need of the Bowen Bay system. The Blue Water system has more needs than that. They also need reliable supply. And Tunstall Bay has, they may have adequate treated water storage capacity, but the reservoir is very old and at the end of its life and in need of replacement. So that may be a standalone project in terms of replacing Tunstall Bay Reservoir on the current site, or it may make sense to provide a combined reservoir that serves all the water systems. So that's something we want the consultants that we'll be hiring to evaluate.
So we're back to surface water then, are we?
No, those are all groundwater.
But a reservoir is are you talking about a surface reservoir or a tank reservoir?
No, tank.
Okay.
yeah, and you're talking about that tank being at the up around the trailhead on Laura Road, correct?
Well, that's a possibility, yeah. I mean, there may be other options. That's one that we've looked at in that it's easy access to Crown land. And we would likely get approval to install community water infrastructure on Crown land. And it's at a good elevation.
Right. Like, I guess one, go ahead.
Oh, and then the other factor that plays into this is that, well, we know that Blue Water and Bowen Bay need additional reservoir capacity. I've mentioned the Tunstall Bay reservoir replacement need, and then there's also the developer for the phase 2 of King Edward Bay has plans to build a new reservoir and road access up to it. So there's a number of capital needs that potentially could be put towards a common storage tank.
The King Edward Bay Phase 2 bringing to the table to, add to the system as they join in, besides, this 14K you talked about for this study?
They're providing a additional groundwater well and pump station as part of this first phase, which is 9 watts. The larger subsequent phase, I believe, has about 25 lots proposed, would involve adding a new reservoir tank at a higher elevation, or possibly putting that money towards a common tank, which they've indicated openness to. Yeah.
And what kind of grant monies are typically available for this infrastructure, the scale of this kind of infrastructure project you're looking at in the RFP, where you potentially tie all 4 systems together, and there'd be I'm guessing a pretty substantial cost associated with that?
Yeah, so there are grant monies available. We'll be looking at all available options. The Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program has intakes for grants that are in various categories. There's one this year that we'll be applying for water project this focused on the east side, the Eagle Cliff system. That one's further advanced in terms of what solutions would make the most sense. We're expecting there'll be there should be other intakes for that program, or there may be other programs. Before we can apply for any grant projects, we need to understand what the capital project is that we'll be applying for. So at this point, we're not clear that is the best option. It's, to me, it's promising, and it's something we need to look at, or it may make sense to upgrade each of the system's storage facilities at the existing sites or alternate sites. We need to get some direction on that before we can apply for grant money.
All right.
That would be
Yeah. I have a question. We're going down, I know there's going to be a study done, that's great. But is there any thought about what the cost may be? Is it $10,000 or $50,000 per hookup?
For a shared reservoir tank?
Yeah, and piping.
Oh, I mean, it's a lot more than that. It would be
more than $50,000 per hookup.
Oh, per lot. No, it would be less than that, probably. The overall cost, yeah, I don't know. I mean, we haven't even gotten to the concept level order of magnitude cost yet. We've only gotten to the stage of identifying the needs. We do for Tunstall Bay. They need about a 250 cubic meter tank, and the budget amount for that is just under 600,000. There's probably a need for a shared reservoir tank to be something close to 1,500 cubic meters, if that would be the option. So, yeah, I would hesitate to throw out a number per lot right now without having some more assessment of the options and at least some order of magnitude cost estimates to go along with it.
How many hookups are there in the whole west side?
There's, let me see, there's about 150 in Blue Water. There's about 30 in King Edward Bay, 60 in Bowen Bay. How many are in Tunstall Bay, Annette?
Testing your memory.
About 130 as well connected.
So
We're
that's,
about 350,
yeah.
370.
Quick question about the two roads that are off Bowen Bay Road, Evergreen Road and Douglas Road. Are they on the Bowen Bay water system or on the holdings?
On here. Evergreen is not on the Bowen Bay water system. They have their own wells. What was the other one you were asking about?
And Douglas Road, just next to Evergreen. They'd be the same developer.
Yeah, neither of those are on the Bowen Bay system.
So will they be considered part of the west side in the future?
Possibly. So we are looking at our consultants that we end up hiring to look at current and future demands, and we will have to provide some assumptions about what could be connected in the future. So we'll have to put some thought into that and have some consultations with the community.
And I suppose the same might apply to the holdings.
It could, yeah.
There is some logic for, you know, an overall approach to the whole west side, especially if you're trying a central reservoir, which is going to involve probably the biggest cost of just interconnecting the different systems.
Yeah, I mean, there's the Bowen Bay, King Edward Bay, and Blue Water systems are all interconnected. The bigger cost would probably be bringing the reservoir itself and lines from those systems to the reservoir. You know, whether it needs to be one connection point or multiple. There's a lot of big picture questions that would affect the costs that we need to, you know, better understand before we can bring forward, you know, proposed alternative solutions for discussion. But the intention would be to have discussions with the community, with the various LACs, when we have a better sense of what the options are.
So when do you think you'll have that study completed?
I would say next spring is realistic, March or April.
And have you hired a consultant for this?
Well, we've got we haven't yet. We've got the RFP posted. It was scheduled to close this week, but we've extended it until October 1st. So we're expecting proposals on October 1st, and then we'll move forward from there as quickly as we can.
Thank you.
Is the intent that ultimate, if that made sense to tie all 4 systems together, or even all 3 systems together, which we attempted to do once already. Is the intent that it would be collapsed into one LAC kind of thing, one service area? And behind that question is the legal question of how the letters patent, as I understand it, have been put forward. Currently, you cannot commingle funds across these various LACs.
Well, the current arrangement is that, but that could be changed. I mean, council has the authority to make that change. You know, ideally, any of those types of changes would be supported by all of the local service areas involved.
Okay.
I think it would perhaps an open house or 2 would be in order, because it is kind of a big question. Do we want to commingle our systems and then suddenly we're all on the same rate of consumption and same water rates, etc. Whereas right now the various systems, some are quite robust, some are struggling, and those, you know, in the robust might argue we'd rather keep our annual consumption rate versus going with, say, the rate that maybe Blue Water has to go with.
Yeah, there will have to be substantial community discussions about the solutions themselves, and also about the financial aspects of it, what the common rate structure would be, and also how the infrastructure is financed. So, I mean, it would make sense that Blue Water would have to pay more than a system that's working well, given that their needs is a bigger driver. But the details around that are to be determined through discussions with the communities, and it's difficult to have those discussions without having some concrete options and cost estimates for discussion.
Although what might be helpful is actually a summary of what are the issues. Like, I'm curious, a lot of us don't understand. There's the whole rumor mill thing and everything. But if we could start out with at least some sort of quite high level, but fairly simple statement that might go out as a discussion or a newspaper article that just says, here's the issues we think are important. And then from there, it might flow to people, envisioning what the solutions could be.
Yeah, that's a good idea. In terms of the issues, at high level, I mean, Blue Water, doesn't have a reliable supply, distribution, or storage. Bowen Bay doesn't have enough storage for fire protection. Tunstall Bay has a reservoir tank at the end of its life. Current King Edward Bay is okay. The phase 2 development needs an additional storage tank at a higher elevation to service those properties. So those are kind of the big needs that are driving this.
Plus the Bowen Bay and Blue Water need to upgrade their distribution system.
Sorry, the Bowen Bay distribution system?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And there may be other needs that relate to the distribution system itself.
Going back to the high level, the first question is, are we, the assumption that we're on one communal aquifer? I don't think that's ever going to be proven one way or another, but it's not a bad assumption to make.
Yeah, it's, if you look at the provincial mapping of aquifers, it shows that, Blue Water and King Edward Bay are on the same aquifer, and Bowen Bay is on a different aquifer. You know, in the monitoring that we've done, there is it does show some impact on, you know, Bowen Bay and Stewart property, the wells on the Stewart property, based on pumping from, you know, the King Edward Bay test well. So, you know, it doesn't really seem like it's, yeah, super clear where an aquifer starts and ends, but
What you're saying is we don't have a 49th parallel.
yeah.
And I understand. So the real questions are the capital cost and the infrastructure, capital costs for tanks and infrastructure costs. Those things are what we need to nail down to look at.
Yeah, it's the focus is looking at infrastructure needs and costs.
Mr.
And
Chair, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Claims Committee report.
oh,
Please go ahead. Oh, okay. Are there any more questions then?
Kind of a general question on the aquifer issue. You know, we're adjacent to Evergreen, which is still developing, and they're all on wells. Any thought about how I mean, and we're controlled to some extent on how much water we can use, whereas I presume well users are not, yet they could affect our aquifers. Have you had any thoughts about that and the future and where that might go? Is there any way to control their usage of water from a well, specifically?
Sabotage?
yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that. What the mechanisms might be for control of private wells. I think we do need to understand, as part of our look at the whole west side water issues. There was a comment here. There was a comment from Glenn indicating that Evergreen is required to use rainwater as primary supply and wells are for backup. But I think we do need to understand what all the demands are out there, both the municipal systems and the private systems that are drawing from, you know, the same groundwater source.
Yeah, good.
I would point out though that probably there's not that many domestic wells near our intake wells. I mean, I have one, but it's 30 feet from the ocean, which I think is quite a ways from our well way up the end of the road.
There's Evergreen, John.
Well, no, we were just informed that Evergreen has to use rainwater with their wells as backup.
I haven't seen any catchment systems in King Edward Bay. I'm sorry, in Evergreen. I haven't seen any catchment system out there. I walk around that area all the time.
It's Glenn Skirhan here, who was the former director last year before Patrick started, and I happen to live in Evergreen. And
I can't hear this guy.
He's
Sorry?
saying he lives in Evergreen.
Okay.
Yeah, I live in Evergreen, and our requirement is to first collect water off our roofs. So we don't have a communal system, but we're required to capture it off our roofs, and then it goes into storage tanks, and we have our own treatment systems. We do have our own wells, but the wells are only backup. In fact, I monitor my complete system, and of the entire calendar year this year, I only activated my well for 1 week.
So each house in Evergreen has a catchment system and a treatment setup?
Yes. There's
So
only-
they're inside the homes then?
They are, yeah.
Wow. Didn't know that. Learn something every day.
Cool.
It's a great theory, but you know, in California, there's legal cases from the South California saying you can't have attachment on the north because you're taking our water.
Okay.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions? Just a reminder, I don't know if this has come up yet, but we will be meeting in late October, early November. Raj mentioned that the financial planning process, 5-year plan process will be taking place over the next couple of months, and the final draft will come to the local advisory committees for review and comment, end of October, beginning November. So we'll be meeting again soon.
I'd like to thank the staff person, the engineer part of the water system here for his great presentation, level-headedness.
Thank you, Patrick.
Keep everybody up to speed. What's going on?
Yes, welcome to Bowen.
So just another reminder, Annette mentioned, please sign up to our mailing list so we can send you information that's been included in this meeting and other upcoming meetings. Okay.
Hey,
Thank you very much for attending. Have a wonderful day.
have a nice glass of water,
Have a nice glass of water.
the ice and whiskey.
Bye-bye.